Hi, everyone. It is another episode of Masks Off. It's Tia here,
I'm Kim.
and today we're going to talk about boundaries. And as always, starting with a quote. So this one is by Christine Morgan. Setting boundaries is a way of caring for myself. It doesn't mean selfish or uncaring because I don't do things your way. I care about me too. It doesn't make me mean selfish or uncaring. Sorry about that, because I don't do things your way. I care about me too. So when you hear that, when you think about boundaries, for me, I was terrible with boundaries, still learning, but it's gotten a lot easier. But when I first really started putting true energetic boundaries in place and mindful boundaries versus the wishy-washy boundaries, I noticed the pushback I got because I changed the rules, right? I was no longer who everyone thought I was. Like, what do you mean you're laying down this boundary? And it wasn't necessarily even one I always had to say, but that energetic boundary. So people may project on you that, oh, you're being mean, or, oh, that's pretty selfish that you're not willing to do that for me anymore. Whatever stories of the other. But if you are solid within yourself, that boundary is true, but there's repercussions for that. And I think that's a part that when people talk about, well, just lay a boundary, they don't talk about what the after effects of that boundary may or may not look like in your relationships.
The hangover.
The boundary. Yeah, there we go. Boundary hangover. So I think that's an important part that I think talking about, and like that quote says, let me bring it back up. It's kind of hard because I can't see that image too, but it's taking care of myself, and it doesn't make you mean, selfish, or uncaring because I don't do things your way. I care about me too. So it's recognizing I'm just as important, but it might make the other feel these negative, what we call negative thoughts at you. And they may be projecting. And that's another episode we're going to talk about too. We won't get into it too much right now, but noticing and preparing yourself that when you lay a real boundary, and I'm not just saying like, oh no, you can't have chocolate for dinner type of boundary, but a like honest and true and difficult one that you've needed to lay, it affects others around you. And you may get some backlash back, and then you have to deal with, oh, I'm a bad person. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have this boundary. It's just easier. Everyone gets along. Everyone feels good. But does everyone feel good? Because usually you don't feel good.
I know.
You're having your boundaries crossed. And I think another part of that is noticing when your boundaries crossed, often you'll feel anger or resentment. And so that's another thing we can talk about too. So have you noticed that in boundaries you've laid? Because I know I have. I mean,
oh my goodness. Well, first of all, yeah, it's so hard. And this all connects to so many of the other episodes and masks, right? Because a couple things. One is that I'm a super empath. I'm a people pleaser. So setting boundaries is really hard for a people pleaser.
Very.
Right? It's, I say no. No, I say yes. I say yes to the person when I really want to say no, because I don't want to disappoint or displease.
Right.
And I don't want the backlash that you talked about of me saying no, because no is a boundary. And then also that no is a sentence is just was always such a foreign concept to me.
Right. We always have like excuses.
Yes. If I said no, honestly, oh my God, honestly, back in the day, I will be honest and say that I would say no, and I would make up things that weren't even right. Like these little fibs, I would fabricate these stories because I was so afraid of the conflict. So I would say, oh, I'm sorry. No, I really can't. I would go on with this
make up this big story.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy.
And then it's like, wait, what did I tell them? Why I couldn't do it? Did you ever catch yourself in that? It's like, oh, like, hey, how was that thing you went to? I'm like,
what are you talking about? Oh, yeah.
That reason I couldn't go to your thing and do that thing for you? Yeah, that thing.
Yes.
So it spirals. I mean, that's a whole nother after effect. And then you're not being true to yourself.
Yes.
So when you said no and made up the lies, you weren't truly holding that boundary in the same way.
I was not, no.
Because you were deflecting, taking ownership of it fully.
Exactly.
Versus when you did say yes, when you wanted to say no, did you feel resentment? Did you feel like, oh, gosh, I don't want to
There
do
was
this?
there was a lot of that. And I think like, even if I take it a little bit deeper, because I wasn't being truthful, I wasn't, right? I wasn't being honest, and I wasn't being authentic.
Right.
I didn't feel good about myself. So there's so many things going on. I didn't want to, I didn't want to disappoint the other person. I didn't want to have conflict with the other person. I just wanted to play it safe. So I would just say, most of the time I would just say yes. Or if I said the no, I gave the story. But if I gave the excuse and the made up story, I didn't feel good about myself, because I'm a person who tries to have integrity. And so when I'm not being honest and being truthful, that didn't feel good to me. And it went into this big looping spiral. So now I didn't feel good. So then I'd go eat because I didn't want to feel that discomfort and that pain of being inauthentic and of not being able to own my truth.
Awareness. Yeah.
Right. So then I go eat. I was not aware of that at the time. I'm aware of it now,
right. You can look back and see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hindsight is 2020. And so I feel like for me, it was most of the time though, even when I was saying yes to the person, because I'm an empath, I'm a codependent, I'm a people pleaser. Wait a minute. Let me correct
things
that
we're raised to be.
Yes.
Right?
I'm not those things. Those I want to correct because
good.
Right. I want to catch myself, because this is what I teach in the rules of the mind with what I do. If I say that I am something, then I'm attaching to that, and I can then make that self-prophecy. So I am, so I'm going to reword that and say, I have tendencies. I've had tendencies to be a people pleaser, to be an empath, to be codependent. Those were behaviors. Those were behaviors and patterns that I've had in my life. And so as a result of doing that, what was I saying? I don't even know where I was going with it.
Just when you would say no, but you'd have a story attached to it. It was the people pleaser. Da, 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 da.
Going back to just the inauthenticity, even when I said yes to the request, but I really didn't want to, two things are at play. The person can feel my energy.
Right.
Even though they may not want to admit it. Oh, and the other point I was going to bring up is that because I've had those tendencies, I attract the people in my life who have been not demanding, but let's just say needy, asking, always challenging me. Taking, always taking. Yes. Thank you.
And they may not always be conscious of it, because it's the same conditioning of the people pleaser.
Yes.
It's someone always does this for me. I don't have to figure it out. Will you do this for me? I don't need to take responsibility for myself. You'll help. You do. So it's not always conscious on either ends. So we have to recognize that too, that the boundaries, when the boundaries are crossed or we don't set a boundary, it comes back again to that co-creation that we've talked about before.
Yep.
Not just you, it's the other, but it's the togetherness of co-creating and continuing this pattern that has been set in play, but we don't have to stay in the pattern.
No.
That thought process, like you said, the I ams. You don't have to stay there. That's not, because that isn't who you are inherently.
It's not inherently who I am.
Yeah. And so noticing and putting that boundary. So what's a big boundary you put into place that you've noticed and that you got some pushback on, and that it felt uncomfortable? It's like, ooh, maybe it'd be easier if I just ignore this boundary and just go back to how it was, because it was easier then.
Well, so here's one, and I've shared the example before, and it is a back and forth. I still can be, sometimes I'm in a stone with it. It's stone, and sometimes it's sand, and I go back and forth.
So before you go into that, let's talk about the stone and sand for people who don't know what that is, because so it's clear when you continue your story. Do you want to explain, or you want me to?
You go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a stone boundary is set. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's more black and white. Like
It won't
100%,
move.
I'm not okay with that happening or not
Yep.
happening. So like a simple example would be, you're not going to let your kid run into running traffic. Stone boundary.
Exactly.
Like you can let them try to figure it out, but you're going to grab their arm and be like, you are not running out there. It's not safe. So that's
Yep.
stone safety, 100%. Sand boundary is it ebbs and flows with the day, so you can have a boundary, but today I'm willing to move it a little bit and then I'm willing to move it back. So you may have a boundary, but and that's what most boundaries are. Most of our boundaries ebb and flow with the energy that's around us, with the person that's there, how we're feeling today. Today, maybe we're feeling a little more like we want to do this for the other person. And we're in integrity with wanting to do it, where tomorrow I'm overloaded. I can't do it. You have to do it yourself.
Yes.
Type of deal. So sand is a movable boundary.
Yep,
stone is set 100%.
Yeah.
Like I am not going to do X, Y, Z ever. I'm not going to let you do that to me either. Okay. So continue your sand, your stone and your sand. Now that
yes. So
our listeners who didn't know that.
Yes, that was good to clarify that. I think that, I'm trying to be aware of when I can be an enabler. So that's when to be in place so that I'm not enabling. And so the one would be with my son with food, right? Preparing food for himself.
Right.
And so sometimes, oh mom, will you make my sandwich? Will you warm that up for me? And then sometimes I'm like, I'll say to myself, like, no, he needs to, be taking care of himself. And so I'll just say, no, can't do it. And I won't, and I'll walk away and then he'll have to do it. And then other times I'll feel like, you know what? So, I don't mind. I'm right here in the kitchen and I'll do it. And I'll warm something up that he's completely like capable of doing. But I have to be aware of it, because if I don't set the boundary and don't, allow him to do it, he could fall into completely relying on me to do it for him all the time. And, not being independent in that way.
Yeah.
Some very stone boundaries that I had when they were growing up and still do. Both drive cars that are insured and registered by my husband and I. And a stone boundary is absolutely zero tolerance for drinking and driving or being under the influence. First of all, it's, a law. Well, my son now is 21, but, before it's illegal to do it anyway, but that is a stone boundary. If you cross that boundary, now you're no longer having the permission to drive that car.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, knock on wood, thank God we haven't had that situation, but I can imagine that if that boundary were violated and they no longer had the privilege of then driving, there would be a lot of kickback you talked about. Because now, how do I get to my job? How do I get to my girlfriends? How do I get to see my friends? How do I where's my freedom is completely taken away now. But that needs to be a stone boundary.
Right. And then the interesting thing with all of what you just said, it's like, so if that were to have happened, which it hasn't, and it would have been, well, now you need to drive me. So then there's a whole nother can of worms in a boundary. It's like, wait, so am I rescuing you? Am I people pleasing you by saving you? So those consequences of a stone boundary could potentially create more boundaries, or like resetting and recognizing, like, wait a minute, how is this going to play out? And so those are what'd you say, the boundary hangover?
The boundary hangover.
Like, wait a minute.
Yes.
Here we go. Yeah. And that's a great example of sand and stone. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
It is really hard. It's really hard, not only because I've had those patterns, and also because, I grew up watching my mom not have boundaries either, with the people around her for the same reasons.
Right.
So it's that nature nurture. Maybe there's a little bit of that in my DNA that I may have inherited from her, but it was also watching her not have, really good boundaries with others. She was definitely a huge enabler.
Yeah.
And I can see that tendency in myself. Just want to be loved. Just want to be loved and liked by everybody.
Right.
Well, and when you set a boundary, just like the quote says, a lot of people will view someone that has good boundaries as being mean,
Right.
selfish, or uncaring. And my husband is really good at saying no. Like if it doesn't vibe with him and, the kids say, hey, dad, you want to do this or you want to do that? Or you want to, nope, nope, nope. And he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
give the excuses or it's just
Just a
no.
no.
You just know, right? And so there is something to be said for finding balance in between being able to be flexible and have a little bit more of those sand boundaries, being
Right.
fluid. And, but he's really, really good at it. But people could say you look at him and say he's being mean. The kids have
Yep.
said, you're being so mean, Dad.
Right. Right. Well, and I think too, that's that another part of boundary setting, it's the masculine, feminine energy,
Yes.
so for him, it's like, no. And
Yeah.
then whether, maybe he has these thoughts of, oh, maybe I should have, maybe I shouldn't, but it
Yeah.
seems to be less so. And the feminine energy is, we're raised to be nurturers. We're raised, when you were
Yes.
talking about your mom and all of that, how many times were we told as children, just be nice.
Oh, yeah.
You got to be a good girl. Be nice.
Yep.
We just
What would,
do
what would
things for
Jesus do?
others.
She would say, what would Jesus
Would she
do?
really? See, I didn't have that.
What would Jesus do? Be like Jesus.
Oh,
Good Catholics don't do that,
oh yeah. Well, there's a
Good
whole
Catholics
nother.
take care of everybody.
At the expense of yourself.
Exactly.
And what is that teaching people? And how is that honoring the other? And that's, I think, an important
Yeah.
part of boundary setting is so not just the safety, like running into the street thing. What you just
Mm,
talked about with the food, that's a brilliant example of if we don't set that boundary, and it can be sand. I feel like doing it today. I don't. But
yep.
the other person doesn't have that opportunity to rise up. Because if we're in our people pleasing, worrying about what other people are thinking, oh, what's the big deal? It just takes a few minutes for me. Well, eventually that person has to figure out how to do things themselves. And if they're not, we see in adults what happens when they were not taught how to clean a bathroom, how to
Yeah.
make their own food, how to, we have apartment buildings and we have two, and one of them is on campus. And so we have seen over the years how parents have done stuff for their kids that wasn't done in previous generations. Now, again, there's varying differences, but they come in, they expect the phone line to be hooked up, or the internet now. And it's like,
Yep.
no, you have to do that yourself. Well, how do I do that? They don't even know how to move forward and figure that out on their own. They expect others to do that. And, that's it's not everyone, of course,
Yep.
but there's less self-sufficiency
Yeah.
or even just saving, money management.
Oh my goodness. I'm just thinking of so many examples. It's like my mind is going round and round.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the financial part of it, going back to my mom again, not having good boundaries, is that she raised my three cousins. They lived with us because their mom passed away when they were
Mm-hmm.
young, and their dad wasn't in the picture. And my mom bailed my cousin out a lot financially.
Mm.
And, instead of just setting a boundary and saying, okay, no, you got yourself into this financial mess, now you need
Right.
to figure it out, he has continued to struggle well into his adult life
Sure.
with managing and balancing finances because he always had my mom to help out. Now my mom passed away in January. She's no longer here. And now it's a hard lesson to learn
Right.
at a later stage in adult life.
So I'm curious, did he reach out to you or any of your other
Not yet.
family members?
Not yet. I mean, he has in the past. Well, okay. So yes, he did once before when Paul and I were first married about, we've been married 27 years, but this was maybe 20, let's just say 23 years ago. He did reach out to us. And again, going back to my husband has very good boundaries and just said, nope, not doing it because he knows that if he didn't get paid back by my cousin, that it would be a problem for the relationship. And
Right.
it was a very smart decision for my husband to make. And because we were both clear and in alignment with that boundary, and we never wavered, he has never asked us again. Maybe one
Wow.
other time, but it was still a no.
Yeah.
And he does not come to us to borrow money.
And it's when you see that pattern, knowing rescuing him is just going to continue not taking responsibility. So there's, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, right? The 100% responsibility, the boundaries, all of that. How would you be serving him? Because it hasn't served him in the past. It's one thing, you know, someone who is moving along and is responsible and then gets hit with, you know, like a health crisis or something.
That's different.
It's totally different. That's a one time. We
It's
help people
extenuating
out.
circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was not extenuating circumstances. This was just overspending, not managing money, getting into a hole. And not that he was aware or conscious or did this on purpose. It's by no means that. There was a pattern, there was an energy that was playing out that he subconsciously knew that if I get into debt, my aunt will bail me out. Somebody will bail me out. I've always gotten out of it before I'll get out of it again.
I don't have to make any changes.
I don't have to make a change
or look
because
at
I've been saved. I've been saved and rescued every time.
Right.
So that's in the subconscious mind. So there's
he
that.
Needs a RTT session.
He does. I know. That would be interesting. That would be very interesting. It would certainly help. That is for sure.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what I was saying, I have to be careful of my own tendencies to enable. Yesterday, my son Ryan, he called me out on it. He said, because I took Angela, it was her first time with the car, to get it inspected and to get the oil changed. And she didn't want to do it. She was putting it off. Yeah, it's scary. It's scary. So I said I would go with her for the first time. And I happened to be telling Ryan last night that I took Angela to get what do you mean you went and took her? What do you mean? I had to do that on my own. I had to do everything on my own. Dad just tells me, go figure it out. Go figure it out. He said, why are you doing that, Mom? She's got to learn how to do it on her own. And, you know, here's my philosophy. Okay, yes, it was a little bit of enabling. I also did want to just go get lunch. So I was like, let's get lunch after.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's an in-between, right? Mm-hmm. For the first time, the FFT, for the first time, I would do something with them to show them. Will I do it with her or for her again? Absolutely not. Now, next year, when the car has to be inspected, she can 100% go do it on her own. Now she had somebody with her, you know, for the first time. She knows all you do is pull up, blah, blah, blah. This is what you do.
Right.
It was interesting to see it from his standpoint because he feels like I do everything for her and nothing was done for him, you know?
Right. So there's that pattern and story that's in his mind.
That's in him. Right.
Well, and I think too, doing it that first time and guiding. So if you go with and you do it all.
Yes.
Is different than saying, I will go with you.
Yep. She drove. She had to talk to the guy.
Yeah. So it's like, look, you survived.
Yep.
You're still
and
standing.
She actually said that. She's like, Mom, that wasn't so bad. Yeah. I said, I know. It was easy. So now you can do it next year. You know?
Isn't it amazing the stories we create in our head that this FFT is going to be like, oh, can't handle it. You know what? Most people are helpful.
Yes.
And they would have helped her if she went alone. But
absolutely.
You made that choice. It's like, it's a sand boundary. You know what? I can go with, and you can get lunch out of the deal.
Yes, exactly.
You know, so you made a conscious choice. You thought about the boundary, looked at it, and then took into consideration who she is, what she needs, what her needs are, and how to move forward in a conscious choice.
Absolutely. And that's a good point that you bring up because each person and each individual is different. So like I would never have to second guess Angela being able to prepare food for herself. She absolutely is self-sufficient in that way. But yet with Ryan, there's where I have to work on my boundaries, you know, and then there are certain things that he's self-sufficient on that I have to do more, you know, working on boundaries with her. So boundaries are sand and can be different with each individual that you encounter as well.
And isn't that interesting too, even kicking it back a little bit more to his story in his head is, I have to do everything myself. You always help, but you just came up with an example of that's not true. So
Yeah,
the stories we tell ourselves aren't true. So yes, did he have to go do the car inspection himself with no help? And he still wants help with food.
exactly. It's hard to
So
be able to look in the mirror, right?
yes.
It's hard looking in the mirror and seeing where we need. I will say he honestly did acknowledge that one. He's like, he goes, I do everything for myself. I'm completely independent except for the food
Da, da,
piece.
da,
He's
da.
like
Yeah,
making myself dinner. And he also
that's
did say,
awesome.
which is, that was
Awareness.
awesome. And he also said the fact that he was put in situations where he had to figure it out. He did say, and that's okay because that's made me stronger. He
Right.
said, that's okay that I had to because it made me stronger and more
Mm-hmm.
independent. So
Mm-hmm.
even though he hated the feeling of it, of having to do it on his own, he recognizes that it taught him something
Yep.
to
Yeah.
have to go and do it on his own.
Well, and don't you have those experiences too? I do. I mean,
Oh
I
my gosh.
remember having to do so much on my own. I mean, like the apartment example, figuring all that out. It's like, wait a minute, we need electricity.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that was obviously before the internet. It's like, who's the provider? Call them up,
Yeah.
put the bill in your name. You just figure it out, and we have the resources within us as long
We do.
as people allow us to figure it out and not do it
And
for us.
that's why the boundaries are so important
Yep.
for the other. Like we
Mm-hmm.
started out by saying setting boundaries is a way of caring for the self,
Right.
and
And
it's so good for the other as
right.
well. So when boundaries were set for us, and I don't know if my parents were aware or conscious when I had to, they just had me go figure everything out on my
Mm-hmm.
own, because I think our parents,
Culturally. Yeah.
yes, they were far less involved than parents are today. That's why
Yeah.
now today you have the terms helicopter parent, lawn. We talked about this
Right.
before, lawnmower,
Snowplow.
snowplow, because parents are doing everything,
Mm-hmm.
everything. I will just say that how much to the extreme, myself included, um, that the college that Angela is going to, they have created a Facebook forum for the parents. Probably not the smartest thing on the college's part. Great
Mm-hmm.
for us parents because we're getting so much information,
Yeah.
but I cannot tell you how many questions the parents are asking where you can see that they're trying to
Oh,
figure it all out
totally.
for their child. Like
Yes.
one parent's like, we're coming to Boston, we live probably in a warm climate. What kind of boots do you think my daughter will
Yes.
need?
We
Like
have
all
those
these.
too on our college, because we have a college parent group as
You do have one
well.
too.
I
Yeah.
think all colleges do now, and I don't know, would they have had it when we were in college? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
my mom had nothing to do with, I mean, college. I don't ever remember any help with anything
Me either.
at all. I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
But same thing, because I'm in Wisconsin. It's like, where do we get boots? Or there was some parent posted the other day, my kid, what classes should he take? And everybody's like, that is between your kid
And the
and their
advisor.
advisor. That's why they have an advisor, because it's a lot of
Yeah.
freshman questions.
Yes.
So it's a big
Yes.
group for everybody, not just for that. Well, with some other ones, what do you think about this apartment building? It's like,
I
maybe
know.
your child should figure that out, who is now a young adult.
That's my
It's,
point.
yeah,
That's my
it's
point in that.
fascinating.
Yeah.
And I can
Now,
understand when my kid has tried to figure this out. We're struggling. We can't
yes.
find the information. They asked me to ask someone else. That's different
Yes. Yes.
versus you can tell the helicopter coming in and saving the day. And did you have a parent orientation type of thing for the university?
When they had the virtual orientation, again, it was virtual because of
Mm-hmm.
coronavirus back in June, they had a 1 day for the parents,
Okay.
and then they'll have another one in the fall.
Yeah. And they had that last year. Ours was in person, but it was interesting how different some parents were. Like you could feel the nervousness and the wanting all the answers. And I will
Yeah.
say the university did a good job of being like, okay, we are going to take the kid. I mean, they literally had I think it was
Yeah.
breakfast or lunch or something. And then we are taking your children with us and you will not see them till the end of the day. And your kid can figure out, and then literally they had to lecture the parents sitting in the hall Let your kid decide the classes. You don't have a say. No, you cannot access their grades. No, do not call their professor. And when they first took the kids away, said it's time
Yep.
to go off and meet with your advisors. They set us up in tables of 8 or 10 or whatever. One mom literally broke down crying.
Wow.
And the daughter was like, Mom, it's okay. It's okay. It's like, she's going away for 4 hours. I think she'll be okay. Let her figure it out.
And you know what? And the thing is, I mean, that may have been an isolated incident with the mom doing that, but let's just say for, hypothetically speaking, if a mom like that did a lot of things in that respect, like what that does to the child, the
Right.
pressure that it puts on the child then to
Mm-hmm.
take care of the mother's needs
and feelings
and feelings.
You're responsible for their feelings.
That is detrimental.
Very.
That's
so there's
detrimental.
A boundary that needs to happen.
Yes.
So in that situation, that young woman needed to create a boundary with her mother.
Yes.
Which probably
is tough
happened.
To do, right? Because she probably wasn't, and most kids are not taught or allowed to set boundaries with their parents, right? Because often,
Respect.
if a child, exactly, that is so disrespectful. How dare you disrespect me like that?
And
so
that's
then
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so then you wonder why so many people have such wishy-washy boundaries and allow people to just walk all over them, can't make decisions, have so much insecurity, because during those developmental years, especially as a teenager, when they're trying to separate and they're trying to say, no, draw the line between your energy and me. I think that was in another quote that we had. You're here, I'm here. We're no longer connected.
Yep.
Separate
humans.
And when the teenager or the child is trying to do that, the parent's like, no, often, no.
I don't want you to leave.
I don't want you to leave, or you will listen to me, and you cannot be your own sovereign being.
Oh, it's so much. So we wonder why we have these thoughts and masks that we wear.
Because you're not allowed to be your own sovereign being, because you tried to set a boundary and you were not allowed to be a separate being.
Right, which brings you back to that quote of taking care of yourself. And there may be people who think you're selfish when in reality, you're taking care and being authentic.
Yeah.
And so some of the biggest gifts, we need boundaries for ourselves, but they're gifts for others to create their own boundaries and be true to who they are.
And isn't that what we want more than anything for our kids?
Mm-hmm. And everyone you interact with.
And everyone.
Could you imagine if we had, and I think it's important too to clarify that when we're talking boundaries, it's not like, oh, this makes me uncomfortable, I'm just gonna create a boundary, like a reactionary boundary.
Yeah.
Because we see those all the time, right? A punitive boundary. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about authentic integrity, true to oneself, honoring the other. It is the ultimate respect, is to create boundaries. So if everyone energetically had healthy boundaries with authenticity, could you imagine what this could be like versus punitive boundaries? Because that's what we see more of. People think a boundary is punitive.
That's such a good point you're bringing up.
And it's not. It's not. If it's punitive, then it's a reactionary, ego-based boundary. It's not authentic.
Right. Which the punitive ones can often cause separation.
Yes.
And then disconnection. Whereas what you're speaking of, and I'm just so glad you brought that in, is that those kind of boundaries creates connection.
Yes.
Right. Oneness, because then you are allowed to be your authentic self. You're allowed to be your true self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what inspired you and I to do this podcast, is wanting to help people by taking off the mask to be able to become more authentic.
Right. And deepen connection, not just
And
to others, but to yourself, because you can't have connection without authenticity.
yeah,
It's hard work, but
it's
oh my
hard work.
gosh. Once you
Yeah,
start to create those authentic boundaries and you realize you can survive the backlash just
yeah,
because it's different and it's not necessarily backlash against you. And you may not have any on some, but some you will because you're
yeah,
changing the storyline, right? You're changing what always was to something else. And it's recognizing, but wait a minute, this is how it feels better, even though it might feel icky at first.
yeah.
You
And it
know,
will.
yes, it will. Because you feel like you're
Yeah.
letting other people down and yourself down, but in reality, you're stepping up. And then once you get through that muckiness, that ickiness,
Mm.
you can stand with such groundedness and knowing, that inner knowing,
Oh,
and the
that
knowing
security.
of
Yep.
when you can dance on the sand boundary and when no, this one's solid. This is a
So
stone
true.
wall. It becomes clearer and clearer the more you practice, but it takes time.
It does take time. This was such an amazing conversation and just a little sneak peek to a course that you and I want to create and develop on boundaries. So
And
more
more.
to and more and
Yeah,
more. So more to come on that in
that's
the
right.
future. We're going to be teaching some courses and I can't wait to do all of them, and particularly this one.
Yeah,
Boundaries is just so, so important.
and
There's
life
so much in
changing.
this and life changing.
It
And
really
there's
is.
so much complexity and layers to this that it'll be great in the course to go deeper
Yeah,
and get to all those layers of this.
exactly. Ooh, good stuff coming.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening and for viewing.
It's been great.
As always, we appreciate your support.
Definitely. And so, if you want to give us a review, we love that.
Yeah.
Subscribe, share with your friends. That's the ultimate compliment we can have is if you share this podcast with others that you care about and want to have more authenticity around you and within. So
Absolutely.
have a great
Absolutely.
day.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.